everybody. My name is Jorden Tucker, and I'm the owner of Brickhouse Deli and Brickhouse Coffee.
What are the duties of someone in your position?
Well, so some of the duties are pretty generalized for like any person that owns a company. So, I got to make sure that I'm paying people, make sure that I go over things like standard operating procedures, inventory, uh, all the way down to doing things like just getting uniforms and stuff like that. Uh, Pretty much everything you would expect to see as somebody running a company.
What did you need to qualify for this position?
So, because what we started to do was not necessarily something that you have to be widely schooled on. It really was just a matter of coming up with the investment capital, which is probably usually the most tricky part of any business venture. Um, but I would say definitely a passion or a drive to produce something, right? And that can be true for uh, anything that you do, right? I mean, if you're going to start a clothing company, like, well, what are you into? Like, oh, I really want to make like surf clothing, or maybe make surf boards, or whatever. But I think whatever you do, like, you should have a desire or a want to have a passion to do it. If you're passionate about something, you'll usually use that passion to drive you and propel you into the things that you're doing. And also because you're passionate about it, it causes you to innovate and think about how you can make things better all the time. If it's something you're uninterested in, you're probably not going to do as well, obviously.
What is your work schedule like?
Um, well, okay, so that's like the blessing and the curse of being an owner of a business. So if you want your business to thrive, you have to be present. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be present in the company all the time, but you definitely need to be presently working on the behalf of the company, almost at all times, right? And that doesn't mean that you're like have to be grinding on the computer or talking on the phone constantly or even making food for consumers, but it does mean that you need to have a mindset that is mindful of what you're trying to accomplish rather, and how are you going to continue to move the line or to move it forward and to try to be daring and do new things and create incentive for your consumer and also keep your employees happy. So you're working almost nonstop, but when you like it, it doesn't feel like work and it doesn't feel like something that you have to do or that's a chore. But it's also a mindset, right? Like if you have a good mindset toward what you're doing and you see what it is that you're trying to accomplish and why you're doing it, it tends to propel you. But to answer the question, how much do I work? Honestly, I probably spend about 8 or 9, 10 hours a day working on stuff, but it's always something different, if that makes sense.
What is your story and what led you to this career?
It's a good question. So everybody's got a story, right? But I think for me, um, I was at a turning point in my life. I had an opportunity to try something different. I was coming off of the heels of a personal tragedy, and it just so happened at the same time I had some things changing in my business life. And so as a result of that, um, my dad had just purchased a building that we were going to renovate together, and it was just a cool little project that we thought maybe could turn into something for business owners to have a property to get into and create their own dream. And while we were doing that, my dad approached me and said, "Hey, what do you think? Like maybe we should open a restaurant." And I said, "I have no idea how to run a restaurant. I don't know what I'm doing. Like I am totally clueless. I know how to run a business because I had previously been helping run a business for the 10 years prior to that, but I had no idea about food or anything like that." but I did always have a passion for food. I love to cook. And a lot of people don't know this about me, but even though we're a sandwich and soup and salad place, I do a lot of cooking at home, and it's everything from ribs and steak and barbecue to Italian and creating sauces from scratch, stuff like that. So I just generally have a passion to cook and to create. Um, but as a result of him asking me let's to do that, I kind of give it some thought, and then because I am somebody who's willing to take some risk and to try some new things, I just said, sure, let's do it. Um, and so I started thinking about what kind of food do I want to do, right? And I came up with, I was always going all over the Pro Valley looking for like a really good sandwich joint. Um, and there were some places that I did enjoy where I would get something that would would fulfill me for that day or whatever. But ultimately, though, I had a different vision for what I wanted from a sandwich, what I wanted from a salad, from soups. And those are the kinds of foods that I really enjoy too, anyway. And obviously, like our baked items, like who doesn't like a good cinnamon roll or whatever? But so that's kind of how we decided that that was going to be what it was. We said let's do soup, salads, and sandwiches. Let's try to hit like a healthy niche that nobody's getting into right now. And at that time too, there was like this really big push, not just locally but all over what seems like America, for people to start eating and doing things that were more artisan, more. And I put not so much fast food, not so much like super paced, but better stuff at a higher price point that people were like, look, I'll pay a little extra for something a lot better. And so we knew from the beginning that that it was probably going to cost people a little bit more to eat, higher quality food. But I didn't let that deter me, because I knew, me personally, that I had this feeling like I had no problem paying a little extra to eat something that I felt like was healthy and was good for my body. And so naturally, that when you're talking to like a food vendor or these different people, and they're giving you pricing and you're trying to produce like a price point to do all of this stuff, like, oh man, this is more than most people are going to want to pay for food when you're kind of putting everything together. But you have to understand that, like, it's more than just the price, right? It's also the market. It's just something that's not available to people. So it's a lot of people don't want to try to do something that like costs too much, because they're afraid like, oh, no one's going to pay for that. But it kind of really boils down more to whether or not you have a market for that. If you don't have a market for it, then obviously you're going to price yourself out. But if you and we didn't know how big of a market we had, to be honest. That's why when we opened, we just had the one suite with the no hole in the wall for the next room. And we've been insanely blessed to be able to continue to expand the way that we have. It's not what we had in mind. It's just kind of the way things have come together. And what can I say? I mean, we couldn't do it without being blessed, but we couldn't do it without having such amazing consumers too. So the Valley has really, really showed up to support us, but they always have too. I mean, they've always been extremely good to our family.
Can you tell me about a time in your career where you felt the most rewarded?
Oh man, I cannot point to you a specific time where I can say that's the most rewarding, but I can give you instances when I feel rewarded. Um, knowing Okay, so right now I have 22 employees, and knowing that I play a role in helping their lives is really important to me. Um, it, it's really fulfilling to know that the things that we set out to do, like create a place that has good soup, salads, and sandwiches. It's really fulfilling to know that it has a farther reach than just feeding people, right? Um, when we come out here and we give like cookies away to people, it's really fulfilling to be able to have conversations with people and to get to know them on a more personal level. Um, you start learning things about their life. You start having opportunities to do things like help their kids in sports or do all this stuff that they're doing, right? I've made some of my most meaningful relationships through this business. And I probably never would have gained that if I didn't own it. And so it's more than just like one thing that I can point to. I mean, there's the fact that I'm my own boss and that I can come and go as I please. There's the fact that that you get to make your own rules for the way that you're going to choose to engage with consumers and all these different things, and that can be anything from like the way you handle your social media to the way that you are able to like come out here and sing happy birthday to somebody or whatever, right? And what's cool about our company is because we're not corporate and we don't have, we're able to be a little bit more flexible because I can just have an employee come to me and ask me right on the spot, like, hey, would it be okay if we did this? And I can give them a yes or no immediately. So that's really cool to have that kind of flexibility. So that's extremely rewarding. Um, there's other things too, but obviously I don't want to. I don't want to get too carried away. You know.
What piece of advice would you offer those interested in pursuing a career like yours?
Well, it kind of depends on whether or not you're talking about restaurant. It depends on whether or not you're talking about being an entrepreneur, just somebody who kind of just wants to work for themselves. Um, it's but without the question being a little bit more pointed, I would say, okay, it's got to meet some criteria. It's so part of it is you might be like insane. Okay, like I like to collect comic books. That's a cool hobby, and there are people who make a living doing that, right? Buying, selling. But part of it is about understanding your market. So if you have a passion for something, um, but your market's not real big, then it doesn't mean that you can't do it, but you just have to understand what your goals are. If your goal is to make a living doing it, it's probably not very likely that you're going to be able to excel to that point if you don't have a big enough market to sell to, right? But if it's like, hey, I have a job, I'm a border patrol agent, or I'm working at like some local place, right? And you're making minimum wage plus tips or whatever. Uh, but you have this passion to like sell comic books or whatever it might be, like make hats and shirts and sell them. You look for an opportunity to get your product in front of people. So that might mean that you're going to just have like a Instagram page, Facebook page where you're able to engage with people and they're able to see what you do and what you've got. And so that way you can make like direct sales that way. Or it might be a situation where you're able to find somebody that has like a store already and you can maybe sublease or rent like a little tiny piece of that store from them so that you're not having to come up with all of the capital to rent an entire facility where there's no way you're going to be able to afford to do that kind of thing. That is probably the trickiest of all scenarios because you're not always going to be able to find a situation like that. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of places that are renting out like 300 square feet. Um, but that's an option. But I would say, like, going back to the initial question, what would I tell people that wanted to get involved in something like this is planning is ginormous. Planning is really huge. And what I mean by that is once you conceptually have an understanding of what you want to do, start putting the numbers together and looking at what is really feasible. And then I would tell you, don't try to get started too big too quick. Start small and grow, right? Because you don't want to create all of these liabilities against yourself. Because if you do that, then what's going to end up happening is you're going to be liable for all of these debts and monies that you may or may not be able to pay back. But it is against your name, and so it's going to matter. The other thing that I would say is talk. This one is probably my biggest one that I would tell you. Talk to people who you respect that have already been successful. Because I did that I talked to 6 or 7 people before I even started this who I really, really respected, who had already made it in business and were doing well financially. Why is that big? Because you begin to create relationships where you have a mentor at that point, which you want to try to do, right? You want to try to get people who, if I can call you and just ask you 2 questions real quick and get some information, like I need to know about setting up a website. I need to know about what's the best way to get in front of people. I need to have a conversation with someone where I'm going to ask them for a favor and I don't know the right way to phrase it, whatever it might be, right? But go ahead and find some people, and this is an area where I would caution you though, is don't just go talk to people that are going to give you all of the answers that you want, because you don't want people who are saying, oh yes, yes, go do that and risk all of this money just because they love you, right? Because they're trying to encourage you, but rather talk to people who are willing to be honest with you and are going to present the realities of the situation. Like, hey, if you're going to do this, this is the numbers that you're going to have to hit, and in order to do that, you're going to have to do X, Y, and Z. You're better off talking to people who are going to tell you the truth in a loving way than you are to have someone who is just going to encourage you to do whatever you want. Even though we all need people at times like that as well.
Who is a mentor of yours?
I've been really, really blessed and fortunate to have multiple mentors. I would be lying to not say that my dad has been huge in terms of I've always been able to ask him anything, and he's always been extremely supportive. Um, and not everybody obviously is in that situation where they have a parent who is you're able to reach like that, right? But almost all of us know someone or know someone that knows someone, right? That can put us in a good position, right? My brother Jared was really, really instrumental. He's talked to me a lot about business and just given me a lot of great advice over the years. And he owns a successful auto body, and he's done that for a while, a lot longer than I've done what I'm doing. But he has given me great advice. And one of the greatest things that he ever told me before I got started was, he said, Jordan, don't ever be afraid of change. And change is constantly going on and it's constantly around you. And the more you're able to embrace change, the better you're going to be at coping with it and being flexible and working to and with that change. And so that was easily one of the best pieces of advice anyone's ever given me, because it's made me not fearless, but just I don't hold on to nostalgia and the way things are. I'm willing to go, yeah, I'm going to make this change. It's going to hurt for a bit, but I believe in what I'm doing, and so as a result of that, I'm going to go with it. And look, I might fall on my face, but I believe in what I'm doing, and so I'm going to roll the dice, and I can live with the consequences, right? I can live like, oh, I want to knock this wall down and try this or decorate this thing like that or whatever it may be, and it might be the wrong call. But sometimes so much of life is about like understanding when you've made the wrong call and then trying to be like, okay, how do I write this, learn from the mistake, and then become a better entrepreneur, a better person, you name it, better whatever, right? But I can't tell you how many times I've made bad decisions, even with great help. Because something that you're talking about can sound great or sound great on paper, right? But then you go and you do it and you're like, you know what, that's not what I thought. Um, so you kind of got to have enough guts to go ahead and just try. But cross off the list first, right? Make sure you've talked to people that you know that you trust. Make sure you have a plan in place, and then once you kind of like feel like you've done all of this, then move forward.
What is something I didn't ask you that you think is important?
I think something that's really important is what drives a person? What drives me? What drives? Okay, so I'm driven by a lot, but um, I'm a Christian guy, and I feel extremely like overwhelmingly blessed every day. I spend some time reflecting on how blessed I've been to have such a great community, to even have the opportunity to have a job and to run a business has been incredible. Um, but I'm driven by probably some of the things that most people are also driven by, like wanting to provide for my wife and children. Um, I'm driven by wanting to provide the people of the Imperial Valley with something that they didn't have. And when somebody comes in and they say, "Hey, man, I just really enjoy this coffee drink," or "I really enjoy the acai bowl," or "I really enjoy this particular sandwich," um, that means a lot. To most people, maybe they don't think that much about it, but it's what we're doing day in and day out. So when somebody tells you, affirms to you that something is working for them and that it makes them happy, um, you're enhancing their life living in the Pearl Valley. That feels awesome. That feels really, really, really fulfilling because um, I think every human being is driven by a desire to feel a purpose, to feel like they matter, to feel like they're are seen or heard, uh, and obviously that kind of stuff makes you feel seen and heard. You know. Um, Another thing I would share too that I wasn't asked about is this is more advice than anything else, and kind of fits into the when you asked me the question about what you have to have in order to like get started in something like this. I will say this: as I have not always been perfect as an employer, and I have not always been perfect to every person that has worked for me, for sure, because I don't think any person is right. But I can say that I think it's really valuable to try to grow, even in that regard, right? Like we talked about change being inevitable. Um, if you're going to have employees, uh, it's it's interesting because you that person is not you, so you're trying to work with and engage consumers with a person, right? Like with another person, and sometimes personalities clash, or you're really busy and people are stressed out and stuff's going on. But I try really hard to make sure that my employees know that they're valued. And I would say, um, if you do want to be an entrepreneur and you are planning on having some employees, maybe get some books and read about like how to be a good employer and how the proper way about doing it. Because I didn't know any of that when I started. I've definitely learned things about that I wish that I had known. Um, because it really is a tremendous, and I use this word a lot, but it is a tremendous blessing to get to work with the people that I do. And I have the awesomest staff. Right? The people that work for me are truly special. And the work that they do on week in and week out is what sustains this place and its reputation. There's no way that I do this without them. Not even a chance. I'm one guy, and I'm one of 22, right? So, um, major shout out to my employees, and then obviously that's an encouragement for you to possibly do a little bit of looking into that before you get started on your journey pursuing a entrepreneur career.